Hello and welcome to our next panel discussion on strengthening digital education. We have a very interesting panel lined up for you that consists of representatives from some of the top institutes in the country, technology firms, startups, and venture funds in the education space. And we are going to discuss how education is finally witnessing the biggest shift in India in decades. To talk about this in detail, let me introduce you to our panelists. Our first panelist of the day is Professor Anju Seth, who's the director at IIM Calcutta. Welcome, Professor Seth.
Thank you so much, Varun. It's a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure. Our next panelist is Pramath Sinha, who's the founder and MD at Harappa Education. Welcome, Pramath.
Thank you, Varun. Same, very excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Our next panelist of the day is Amit Patel, who's the managing director at Owl Ventures. Welcome, Amit.
Thank you, Varun. Thank you for having me here. Excited for the discussion.
Thanks. Our next panelist is Aakash, who's the CEO at Quest Alliance.
It's great to be here. Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Aakash. Our next panelist is Shalini Kapoor, who's an IBM fellow. Welcome, Shalini.
Thank you. Thank you, Varun, for having me here. Excited to see what we have to discuss today.
We will also be joined by Arjun Mohan, who's the CEO at India upGrad. So he'll be joining us shortly. So without further ado, let me just start this conversation with Professor Anju. So, Professor, you run one of the most premium institutes in the country, and you interact with a lot of industry experts. Just wanted to get some sense on how do you see the pandemic changing the industry and priorities for businesses as well as institutes like yours?
Clearly, one of the most important priorities for businesses, irrespective of the industries that they represent, is the move towards greater agility and greater resilience. We talk about transformation in many different ways, but the speed of response has become just such an important imperative for all businesses to consider. Now, in the context of providing that sort of speed of response, how do educational institutions such as ours provide capabilities to be able to serve the needs of businesses? This is one of the most important issues that we consider at IIM Calcutta, building in the capability for resilience, building in the capability for flexibility. And this also entails a new way of thinking about what it means to work in a business environment, that of being an entrepreneur beyond similar to being an entrepreneur. So a greater degree of flexibility, a greater degree of looking into the future and trying to provide an appropriate response in the present. This kind of skill is something that has not traditionally, I think, been the purview of business schools, but is becoming much more important for us as we move on. And I'll talk a little bit more about the global aspects of it, but these are some of the most critical aspects.
Thanks so much, Professor Seth. Pramath, coming to you, now you headed some of very old and premier institutes as well, and now you're heading one of the youngest educational institutes in the country. With this whole transformation that's happening, what do you think education should head towards in India?
I want to build from what Anju was saying. I completely agree with her that the combination of resilience and agility is what is required, whether it's a business school or it's somebody who's just come out of a liberal arts program and is looking to work in a social sector organization or in the corporate sector. I think the additional challenge that this places on young people is the fact that the workplace itself is changing a lot. And it means that what is required of you at the workplace is changing, and your own career will go through significant shifts and transformations throughout your life. There's just no way you can study to prepare for this career today. And therefore the question becomes, is anything constant? Or is everything, can education ever keep up? Now, the positives for me are that actually there is something constant, and that's what and this is not a sales pitch for Harappa, but Harappa is the culmination of my life's work, where I fundamentally believe that there are certain evergreen foundational life skills that people need to build, particularly now that you are going to need the agility and the constant and the ability to be resilient to constant disruptions and the multiple career shifts that you're going to have in life. And these skills are not new. I think we are born with these skills as human beings. So I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. On the other hand, the challenge is that our education system has not inculcated and nurtured these habits and skills in us as young people in schools and colleges. And so I think we have to go back to the basics, and we have to make sure that everybody has those foundational skills that will be their hedge and be the sort of protective core that takes them through this new workplace of the future, which is going to be much more demanding. And that's how I have actually focused on both at what we have done at Ashoka and now what we are doing at Harappa. It's really going back to the fundamentals. That's what higher education was always about, and that's what it needs to become. That's what the best institutions in the world today try to teach, and I think we need to go back to that as well.
So that's an excellent point, going back to the basics. Amit, you invest in a lot of edutech startups, and Anju and Pramath talked about the agility and going back to the basics. How are some of the startups that you're investing in really looking at that? And where do you see education, the edtech sector really moving towards?
So I echo a lot of what both of the previous panelists said. And at a high level, I think fundamentally what the pandemic has done is pulled forward edtech adoption. Now the question is whether it's pulled it forward 5 years or 10 years. That will just get determined. I think kind of in the next couple of years. But overall, we're at the kind of very early stages of the edtech evolution, I would say. Education is the second largest industry in the world after healthcare, and only about 2 or 3% of the spend in education is spent digitally right now. Versus if you look at more mature industries, it's closer to 20% or more. And I think this last year, when you had schools that were shut down, universities that were forced to go online, and employers that were embracing remote working, edtech became not a nice to have, but a must have. And so I think as learners, institutions, and employers all started to embrace edtech solutions, I think that this is pulling forward that adoption that I was mentioning by 5 or 10 years. I think you couple that with the fact that kind of in India, kind of the data shows that you're going to have 500 million people or so that are going to come online for the first time over the next few years. And I think this segment's going to be embracing mobile technology for e-commerce, for paying online, and also for services like education technology, because that could have a meaningful impact on the trajectory of their life. And so kind of both of these facets, I think, are making right now a really exciting time for the education technology sector.
Thanks, Amit. Aakash, coming to you. Now, Amit talked about the importance of digital education, but digital education has also brought in this digital divide, so to say, in the Indian education scenario. How can we actually look at bridging this gap and not really make digital education all about the more privileged ones?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, that the digital divide is there right now. Especially for girls, only I think 20% girls have access to digital devices as opposed to about 40-45% boys. So there is a whole gender gap when it comes to access to digital devices, and that stops girls from participating meaningfully in the new careers that are emerging, in the new learning opportunities that are emerging. Oftentimes we've seen that households, and in our context, the work that we do is in government schools. We do work in ITIs, which are preparing young boys and girls for for the future of work, and where we believe that, also building on Pramath's point, that self-learning or learnability is going to be critical for someone to continue to grow, adapt, and learn. And in that context, while digital platforms are emerging, I think what we've also realized is, especially with the lockdown, that phones, even interactive voice response or voice messages, when we send tips to parents on how they can engage children at home meaningfully by using their surroundings as learning spaces, can become a powerful way to also enable learning at home. So I do believe that that really focusing on parents, and because they have the devices, is, especially in the context of government schools, is going to be key to bridge that gap where learning needs to happen anytime, anywhere, and by anyone sitting at home, and parents become a key enabler um, in that process of really bridging that divide as well. So that's a quick thought on this point that you put out.
Thanks, Akash. Now, Shalini, coming to you. Now, digital education has been a boom and a bane for many, like Akash also pointed out. So, what are some of the lessons that we can talk about from the remote education delivery, say, in the last 1 year?
Sure, very interesting. When I look at last year, I would say as a technologist, my observation has been that it was the biggest experiment that we could have done in education, right? It was what we wait for, actually. So, not going with the, bad sides of the whole pandemic year, but as technology people, we really want a lot of usage of technology by people, which we can never get as we got in last year. And I also call it, like, it's one of the biggest sagar manthan of for education sector, because actually there is like in sagar manthan, there's a lot of disturbance, lot of upheaval, but there are some nuggets which come out, nuggets which we can use and which can guide us for the future. And some of the nuggets which came out were, we saw people experiencing, and when we say people, it's students at K-12 or higher ed level, we saw them experimenting with tools at such large scale. And in that we discovered that personalized learning is something which students look for, right? Whether it is higher ed or at the lower, any class where things are just being told. Up till now we had, and this applies, and I'm sure this will go and apply to the physical space as well, that how can we have personalized learning tools for the teacher and for students, and a mechanism in which what a student needs is taught, right? And that needs are, and the learner profile is something which need to be mapped per student. So became an important discovery when we saw that the mass classes are not. The other part which happened was on the teacher, the onus on teacher suddenly skyrocketed, right? Because teachers were never trained, first of all, and then there is an onus for them to keep the student engaged. So how we can provide technology tools to the teachers, which can help them mapping their students, which can help them and do quick lesson plans for them, do quick best of the courses available for them. How can we curate that experience for a teacher? That became extremely important. So from a student profile as well as from a teacher profile, the personalization and the curation which is needed is what came out as nuggets or out of the Sagar Manthan which happened last year.
It's clearly been a really challenging year, especially for the teachers, who have to really adopt to the new way of learning. There's been a lot of abuse that we've seen happening, and teachers really braving that front. Professor Seth, I want to understand from your perspective, when it comes to digital education, we've seen high dropout rates in world's topmost institutes also. The moment you tell students that you have to take your education digitally rather than in a physical mode, people just want to avoid that. And there's, even when they enroll for the digital part, there's high dropout rates. So how do you really make sure that digital education really works for the students?
So, Varun, I think you've raised a very important question, and that is the need of different segments of customers, if you like, for education, right? There is going to be a customer base that wants an face-to-face experience, and that segment will always persist. And to the extent that at IIM Calcutta, we have a very strong program, as you know, that is on-campus based. And one of the prime aspects of the on-campus experience is the networking opportunities, the group projects, and this joint learning that happens in a campus environment. That group of students will always exist, that segment will always exist, and we have to be, as educational institutions, prepared to be able to provide the experience that that group of students requires. But at the same time, the idea of leveraging the competencies of educational institutions to deliver the needs of other kinds of segments of the population, whereby the focus is more on the core learning. We were talking about what is it that the new environment requires in terms of learning needs. We can say that we have products to deliver, but there also has to be a recognition from the point of view of the learner as to what that learner requires. It is a matching of the needs of the learner and the capabilities of the educational institution to be able to provide that, to be able to service or satisfy that need. So I think that the great thing that the COVID environment has taught us is that the viability and the strength of this group, the latter segment that I've talked about, the need of the learner that can use technology in order to be able to satisfy their learning needs in a lifelong fashion. The other thing that we've learned is that this is not likely to be stagnant. It's gone are the days that somebody got a degree on straight out of college, took a position, and then continued to just utilize those skills. Things are changing, so this lifelong learning capability is something that is absolutely crucial that we will have to think about using technology. But it's not just the use of technology. I think one of the most important things that we have to think about is enabling our learners to be comfortable with utilizing technology in their lives. Technology is here to stay. Artificial intelligence, analytics is here to stay. So thinking about what we teach, how we teach our subjects in a fashion that technology is inextricably intertwined with the kinds of solutions that we are considering for businesses down the line is something that we all would like to pay attention to.
Thanks, Professor Seth. So Arjun has just joined us. Let me bring in Arjun into this discussion. Arjun, we are talking about the challenges that teachers face in this whole digital landscape, and it's actually the biggest shift for them to be able to teach in this format, handle students, and really keep them motivated. Now, you're in the edtech space. How challenging is it for you to get teachers who are trained on this and make sure they adapt to this rapid evolution?
See, in my mind, I think we are going to see a golden age of teachers. That's what I anticipate to happen in the coming era. See, traditionally, right, we are all today where we are today because of our teachers. They mentor us, they give us the right moral education. They do a lot of things, but unfortunately, we are living in a society where teaching as a job has been underpaid for many decades now, right? It's been a lot of places, a lot of people I know, it has become a very thankless job. I think, yes, edtech has revolutionized the format in which education is imparted, but it has also really brought in forefront the whole idea of the importance of teaching today. I mean, entrepreneurs today has proved that you can build huge businesses if you have exceptional teachers in the background. So I feel that with all the interest which is going around in education today, in edtech today, tomorrow's best edtech will be defined by the quality of teaching, by the quality of mentorship, by the quality of interaction you can have with your students. And that will be primarily dependent on the quality of teachers. So in my mind, yes, it is challenging. A lot of our teachers are relearning things on how to impart it in front of a laptop, how to engage students, even when talking through a camera and a microphone. But it's also changing the dynamics of the things. it is also making it more and more evident that great teachers are extremely important to build great edtech companies. So in my mind, I am really looking forward to see the golden age of education, the golden age of teachers coming soon.
Golden age of teaching, as you say. Pramath, coming to you, we've talked about the challenges that teachers face and about digital education challenges. But when it comes to the whole credibility issue of digital courses, a lot of enterprises still, demand physical courses. They still look for those 3 years, degrees or 2 years post-graduation kind of degrees to actually qualify for any job. So, how do you see the whole credibility really shifting in the education space, in the digital education space?
I think some of these things that we are rediscovering have been true for the in-person brick and mortar space as well. It's just that digital education has brought that out much more, or has accentuated it much more. So let me give you examples and tell you exactly what I mean. So the ISB is unaccredited, unrecognized in India. In fact, it's a rogue institution as far as India is concerned. It will just complete 20 years, and this year both the FT and the Economist ranked it #1 in the world in MBA programs. It's accredited by 3 accreditation agencies internationally, so it has so-called the Triple Crown. These are all sort of marketing terms I'm using, but you know what I'm saying. This is an institution that has no standing in our country, yet graduates 1,000 full-time MBAs a year and many more part-time MBAs. It is probably the largest program in the country I think it is. The point I'm making is that credibility comes from your delivering on your promise. And more employers, students, and parents are settling for outcomes rather than degrees. Now, you may say, well, that's a postgraduate MBA, Pramath. It doesn't apply to undergrad. Well, if you dig deeper, you go to Bombay and get a diploma, a 4-year diploma in design from the École Intuit Design in Paris. Has no bearing in India, that degree. It's not a degree, it can't even be called a diploma. Those who want, go and take a online degree or a distance degree from Mumbai University or IGNOU and satisfy their parents' urge to have a degree. Employers don't care. They're happy to go because Intuit has a great reputation. I run a program called the Vedika Scholars Program for women. Same story, 18 months, we have 120 women graduating this year, average salary of 11 lakhs. I could go on and on. What's happening is this is becoming accentuated online, because when I had to do this offline, I had to find a building, we had to fly in faculty, you had to get a hostel for students, right? And that will always exist, like Anju said that, that segment will be there and should be there. But that quality of education is now going to be available to a lot more people. And that's the real leveler. For all the talk about the advantages and disadvantages and completion rates and so on, I would like to submit that we in India are wasting our time if we are still discussing positives and negatives. 90% of our students have no access, or access that is so poor quality access that it is like no access. How are we going to get them teachers and classrooms? It ain't going to happen. Will not happen in my lifetime. You are younger. My submission is won't happen in your lifetime. The teacher-student ratio and so many students to a classroom model will not work in India. This is not an option for us. And what the option is for the US and the West is different. So I think that's the reality that we are faced with. We are left with no choice. I agree with Arjun. The challenge, though, is that in that model, which is the golden age, you are going to have IPL teachers, right? So the guys who make it to the IPL, or the women who make it to the IPL, get fat salaries. They're very popular. The whole world knows them. They are part of your rockstar MVPs, but there are a lot of people who are going to left behind because they will not be able to perform on screen. Outlier, which is one of the latest players in the game in the US, which is offering a degree for credit, a course for credit from the University of Pittsburgh for $400, very high quality. I mean, it's superb, the level of quality. They actually do a screen test, which is why I was joking with you and Anju in the beginning. They do a screen test before they hire you as a faculty member, a screen test. And I'm not kidding you. They go through 35 people and pick 4 who have great screen presence and are able to engage online and so on. So that's what we are moving towards. And it's great for the students, I think, because otherwise they were not getting anything.
So that's an interesting point. Amit, coming to you, there are so many institutes that are vying for the same quality of teachers. And like Pramath said, there would be a segment that will not care about the kind of degree or diploma you offer. It's more about the quality of education or what the outcome it really offers. So, when you work with the companies that you've invested in, how important does that factor become about the quality of teachers and the program they are running rather than the technology part of the business?
Yeah, I think this is an important question, and it's not like kind of a one-size-fits-all answer. I think it depends on kind of the part of education that you're looking at, kind of the age of the student that you're looking at, and kind of ultimately what the goal of the program is. And what I mean by that is, if you're talking about kind of adult students that, let's say, are looking to get a job or get a promotion or move into a new career, I think there's different types of partnerships there that can really be meaningful and be kind of this out of the box type of offering. And I think that involves kind of bringing together a variety of constituents in those types of offerings. So by what I mean by that is, you have a new entrant, whether it's folks like Outlier or some of these boot camps or other fellowships that have emerged, and they're partnering with the employers that are ultimately looking to hire that individual, and they're partnering with the university institutions. And I think you actually have to bring all 3 of them together in order to create kind of a high quality program. A lot of them tend to be, offering programs that are, months in terms of length rather than years in terms of length. And they're also, kind of really aligning incentives for all of those folks that are involved, meaning, there is some type of payment that the new entrant or the fellowship provider gets, but it's connected to the student actually getting a job, or it's connected to the student actually getting a promotion, right? And so as a student, when you're entering into that type of program, you're saying, okay, yes, I might not get a degree after I graduate from this program, but look at their graduation rate, look at their placement rate, look at kind of the average salary increase that folks are getting. And so I think when you're talking about that type of alignment, I think that can really introduce pretty amazing kind of innovation into the sector and into the offering that students can kind of access then. And you have a variety of programs that kind of get introduced. I think coming back to your question though, in terms of kind of teacher quality, I think especially in the early ages, when you're talking about students that are in early elementary, like that really matters, right? I mean, I think there's a tremendous amount of importance, and I think all of us can attest to that. Some of the most influential teachers and kind of some of the most important lessons that we learned are at those early ages. And so, I don't think that we're moving into a world where, AI and technology and things like that are going to replace kind of that human interaction and that meaningful kind of interaction that happens between teachers and students. I think the role of education technology is going to be to create more time, more space for those meaningful interactions to happen, and take some of the things that technology is great at, whether it's data analytics or things like that, and kind of do that in the background for the teacher so they can stay focused on those meaningful interactions.
I think that's an interesting point. Aakash, coming to you, when you talk about integrating the whole physical and virtual education, and especially talking about getting teachers really trained on new platforms. It's more about augmenting teachers' abilities using technology rather than looking at newer teachers who can maybe do that better. So, how do you see technology really augmenting the capabilities rather than just competing with the physical world of education?
Yeah, I think a few things there, and just building on some of the points Amit made. Oftentimes, when we all moved to the digital platform, we started kind of using the digital platform as almost a replacement of the physical space. So you started running online classes as opposed to, say, giving learners the opportunity to learn concepts and subjects and come to a physical a virtual classroom to show say what they have learned. So you ended up most often we ended up recreating the classroom experience in the virtual world, as opposed to using the virtual world for what it is good at, which is creating good content, getting feedback, the data analytics that Amit spoke about. So I think the big shift for teachers, at least that we've seen in, and again working with government school teachers and government training institutes, was one, just basic comfort with digital literacy itself. That was the first barrier to cross for teachers, how to really be comfortable teaching using digital tools. I think the second was, how do you really then be a effective teacher building relationships in the virtual world? How do you give that kind of feedback that's personalized? So that shift, that I can use the virtual world for some of these tasks that I need to do as a teacher, how to look at data that's being generated from the platform and provide that personalized assistance to learners. How do I also become an effective peer teacher, which means how do I reach out for support to my other teachers and get ideas, share my lessons within a community of teachers. That became an important shift that teachers started. We needed to make with teachers, where they started sharing these stories with their peers. So I feel that a lot of these are things like, we've been saying that hold true in the physical space as well, but the virtual has really amplified that possibility and has allowed more teachers to effectively participate in peer groups, has allowed teachers to also learn concepts which they otherwise wouldn't know about. And started to learn how to deliver those concepts in the virtual world. So we've experimented with this whole concept of an online teacher. What are the skills of an online teacher that need to be learned as we make this transition from a completely physical to kind of a blended learning model? And that's those are just some quick reflections on what you shared.
Thanks, Aakash. Arjun, just a weird question you might think, but just want to understand the kind of technology we are talking about these days, about the use of AI and different platforms. Is it possible to templatize learning and to eliminate the subjective skills which teachers really require? Is it possible to make it a template so that every student gets the right kind of education without worrying about who's actually teaching?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question and something a lot of people have been trying to solve for. One part is very clear. That is, you can't have a one size fit all education with you try to make the similar kind of things and expect everyone to come and be engaged. And that is the problem with the traditional classrooms, right? Teacher will go teach in a different, particular manner. Only few people will understand it and will be happy about it. So one part everyone has been trying to solve is, how do I personalize the experience? How do I ensure that the model customizes the kind of engagement or kind of material provides the teacher, provides the student based on the level of the student. So typical way to do it is, the AI model or the ML model will initially assume that the student is an average student, and start with a context setting video. Context setting video is something everyone will relate to, and then ask a few questions on what they what the assumption is that they know. If they answer all the questions right, then they assume that, okay, this person is a bit more higher level than the existing level, and you start skipping topics and you start asking him tougher questions. The reverse is also possible. Knows that, okay, this person doesn't understand this concept, so I go back and show him videos of that particular concept. So what is really happening is, if you look at the way education systems online is evolving these days, it's a highly modularized content, a highly bite-sized content, where you're picking up a teacher who may be really good at delivering a particular piece of idea. It need not be the same teacher doing the entire thing. So you are fundamentally saying that there are teachers who are good with certain topics. And I know that when the teacher explains it really well for those topics, I will be able to reach out and engage more and more students. So have that teacher for those particular topics. So both ways it start working. Although the specific problem you asked is not something which people are trying to solve, on an average or overall, when you're trying to solve the student's problem, that's also getting solved, because you are finally asking the teacher only to do topics which they are comfortable with, right? And I'm sure all of us can relate it to, right? We had teachers who were forced to do the entire mathematical syllabus, and they were very, very keen on doing certain topics, but not too keen on doing other topics. So what I'm saying is, because of this whole scale building out today, right? Because of this whole aspect of so many good teachers, and there are so many students able to come into one platform and get engaged, all these combinations are possible with the help of technology. So this is how things are evolving today. Yes, and although we keep saying the buzzwords of AI ML, but this is one place ML algorithms are used in a very, very very, very deep manner, simply because the equation you are trying to solve is multivariable. There are multiple variables and you don't even know the coefficients of each of these variables. So you need a lot of regression to figure that out, and that comes only with a ML model.
Right, so it's more of a moonshot problem that a lot of companies are still trying to solve.
Most basic problems are always moonshot, but that's the game there, right?
Shalini, coming to you, a lot of these transformations that we've talked about actually correspond to some of the very elite institutes within the country, and a lot of we have thousands and thousands of schools and colleges, but not everyone has even the basic infrastructure. So when it comes to actually delivering basic digital education, what are some of the key things that can be delivered with low cost and make digital education more accessible for more and more students?
Sure. So we have done a lot of experiments in both in K-12 schools as well as in higher eds to figure out as to what works and what doesn't work. And in fact, we are teaching 200,000 girls about coding, about IT skills, about just using computers in almost 100 Navodaya schools. So that experiments have also made us very comfortable about what will work with them. Now, the answer to this is actually in two parts. One is what we have learned from schools, and the other is what we have learned with our interaction with higher institutes, higher education institutes. So in schools, it is a lot about the teacher being the control point, because the teacher is the one who uses more tools and engages the students and is bringing technology to them. In fact, there are some schools where we have done experiment where the basic thing which is needed is just a TV monitor or a screen, because that's the lowest ed thing which we can tell them and show good videos through them, right? So that's the lowest and cheapest thing possible. But there are some interesting things, like we have taught AI bots about grade 8 maths. And we said that this AI bot will be available to all the students whenever they want, right? So Pramath talked about the classical problem of teachers never being that much in supply. If you want to train everybody across on the face of earth. So and I remember as a student, I always used to struggle when I'm solving math problems that I wish I could, I know the process to solve it, right? So an AI bot, which is just as your assistant, as your help to guide the student students, help in the problem, and we have seen some very good results. It's not replacing the teacher, and again I'm saying that it's a physical teacher can never be replaced. But when you look at the math of reaching a large number of students, these mechanisms and these aids really help the students when the teacher is like, you're solving the problem late in the night or at any point of time. So these interactions, and there is a lot of work on language translations, on language models that we have done to make these conversations contextual and relevant. So that's the work we have been doing. And in higher ed, there is another piece of work which we are doing where we are focusing a lot on how a student, say in Kalburgi in Karnataka, right? I mean, that student has enrolled into a local college and the college is down, or maybe, it's a 3-year com science course and he doesn't have, or she doesn't have access to the best courses. Their teacher in computer science is not as good. So there could be a model and mix and match of model where, they can actually be doing courses, an IBM certified AI course, and they get credit for that in their college. Or it could be, not just IBM certified course, it could be any course on Coursera taught by, say, a University of Michigan, where they can enroll into that course and their college recognizes that course. And so imagine a student, in a small town in Karnataka is doing a mix and match of digital and virtual worlds. They are doing attending physical classes, as well as they are enrolling and getting credit from the classes, and assessments are something which are recognized by their professors. Need not be recognized by any government body or so, but yes, it is a mix and match. So these are some experiments which we are doing, and we have seen that technology in each of the scenario is a great enabler, takes it to scale and makes it personalized and contextual. That makes it work.
Thanks for that perspective, Shalini. I just so we are running short of time. I'll just take one last question, and I would request everyone to comment on that. Starting with Pramath, the kind of institutes you've built, you clearly care the least about any government support. But if we actually talk about government's involvement in promoting digital education, what do you think should be done from a government standpoint?
So, firstly, let me state on the record that I care a lot about government support. In fact, all education in India cannot happen without government support. ISB happened because of the great support by Chandrababu Naidu and the wonderful piece of land he gave us. Punjab government for the Mohali campus, Haryana government for Ashoka, and that's very much with government support. Shalini and I are actually building something very unique, and I had just been logged off for a few minutes. I don't know if she spoke about that, but a platform called Sam Shiksha, which we are actually doing in the private sector, but with full government support. I think government support is very important. Listen, formal education has to be supported by the government. It's a public good. I believe that the government, for the taxes we pay, for the responsibilities government have, they have to be a major player in education, as in health and so on. Now, there, I think we can work in partnership to help support them in making what they are offering better. And of course, vice versa. And I completely endorse the point that we have to work together. The challenge we face as a country, all of us, by the way, sitting here who are doing something in education are just a spray in the ocean, not even a drop.
Professor Seth, few words from you on this.
So clearly, one of the most important aspects of digital education is the availability of digital infrastructure. And I think one of the things that we've learned in the COVID environment is that there is woefully inadequate infrastructure in many rural areas where our students lived. And so trying to ensure that they had good access to the courses that we delivered became a very important priority to us. So that's sort of, hygiene factor. We have to have good infrastructure around the country. I think going beyond the hygiene factor, I'm a great believer in the idea that we have to all understand each other's points of view. From the point of view of the government, the NEP, I think, is a great move forward in terms of the vision it sets out for the country. However, the devil is in the details in terms of implementation. And so how do you then bring about good implementation? That requires partnerships and good governance practices that recognize the strengths and capabilities of each of the partners collaborating in the system. So, for example, when we think about delivering digital education, we at IIM Calcutta don't have the capability to do this in-house. We think in terms of collaborating with partners. One of the ones that we're talking to is Coursera. But we also want this to go global. I think the other point about other aspect of education that we also need to think about is this global reach. When we think about scalability, not just within India, but thinking about that global reach, there's an important aspect of the COVID environment that has brought a new aspect of globalization to light. And that is our audiences are in fact worldwide. Pramath was talking about University of Pittsburgh offering courses to students in India. And we can offer courses to students around the world. And that making India an education hub for the world is something that I think that the government can really do, help us with moving forward in, helping us globalize to a greater degree with good governance practices to make sure that we are actually delivering on the outcomes that we're talking about. The ideas that some of my co-panelists very nicely elucidated about flipped classrooms. So the specialized expertise of the teacher to deliver not just simple concepts. Simple concepts can be learned at home and learned by virtue of seminars, AI models, and so on. But then the application of those simple concepts in complex ways to encourage critical thinking. These are the kinds of skills that our teachers can be and do have in order, and how we then leverage these skills to then reach that global audience is something that I think the government would help us.
So that's a great point, and in fact, education is also a big opportunity for the economy. A lot of economies depend on their education system, and a robust system obviously would do great wonders for our economy as well. Amit, just 2 cents from you on government's support in this.
Yeah, so echoing kind of what's been said already, I'd say a few things. One is kind of continue to implement policies that promote EdTech solutions and the adoption of EdTech solutions. I think the infrastructure point is key, and not just connectivity of infrastructure, but also kind of having low-cost devices that are actually purchased by institutions, so that regardless of socioeconomic background of student, they actually have a device that's being provided to them by the institution, and it's not, kind of the family's responsibility to provide that device to the student. I think that incentives that could be given to companies that are innovating in the ed tech sector. So whether that's new technologies that are coming in, or whether that's introducing curriculum in a variety of languages and localizing the content as well. And then I think the kind of the biggest role that the government could play is like kind of convening leaders from the ed tech sector, from universities, from the K-12 sector, as well as the leading companies, to come together and really co-create solutions that serve the next generation of learners, right? You've had this kind of history in education where it's almost siloed, where it's like you have the K-12 system, then you have the higher ed system, then you have kind of the employer world. And it's, how do we erase those lines that exist, and how do we have people think about, starting in kindergarten? It's not just about, getting the student to get to first grade. It's about how do we have an impact on that student's life, their first job, their, kind of lifetime income and things like that. And how do we create a system that really supports them, kind of from pre-K to gray, if you will. So
thanks for that. Aakash?
Just one thing I'd want to say apart from what's been said, which is really the point around really going out and getting more learners on the platforms that are existing and that are relevant to the kind of learners that they reach out to. So for example, in a state like Haryana, we were able to, during the lockdown, onboard almost 100,000 learners because the government was really championing that, was gamifying that at all levels in the ITI, saying, how many students have been onboarded, what is their completion rate, what is the kind of engagement that they are having, And because of that kind of a governance system, that or a follow-up and review system, we were able to reach 100,000 learners in a matter of 3 months, who started also not just enrolling themselves, but also almost 70% of those were completing the courses that were there on the platform. They were also looking at onboarding teachers on the platform to start supporting the learners. So I think it's that kind of a follow-up that if the government has in enabling digital learning, that can really open the floodgates. I think obviously infrastructure is important, the assessment strategies are important, but it's really them being advocates and then following up with a strong review mechanism that can really be a game changer, I feel, in terms of adoption, engagement, and as a result, hopefully better outcomes as well.
So more of consistent reviews, you would say. Arjun, anything to add from your side?
I mean, most of the things have been already covered. I feel that the new education policy is an excellent document, really shows the intent of the government. But finally, I mean, the proof of the pudding isn't eating it. So let us see the implementation part. Unfortunately, sadly, the implementation has been quite slow so far. I think in that document, the government clearly recognized that the solution for India's bad GER, gross enrollment ratio, is not in building those university buildings more and more, but the solution is online. And hence it is about going online and supporting students to go to the next level. That's coming out very well. And I think, I mean, at least the entrepreneurial space has been screaming this for a really long time. Companies like us has been working. And as Professor just mentioned, ISB is an excellent example. Okay, majority of the students in ISB comes online today. I mean, look at upGrad or any of those companies in this space today. We have, if you actually count it out, our alumni base is bigger than all IITs and IIMs put together today, right? So that's the impact which is getting created, and this revolution is happening now silently. And it is becoming a revolution day after day, because one stakeholder is finally realizing that this is as good as it can get, and that stakeholder is corporate, the jobs, right? Finally the corporates are realizing that, okay, it doesn't really matter. Finally a guy has the intent, he has studied wherever he studies, finally he does my job. So it is silently happening. If the seal of approval from the government comes in saying that this is as good as any other education, the amount of time it takes to really make this change shrinks down drastically. So that is where I would be really keen on seeing government action, wherein they say that whatever they are suggesting in those documents, they really implement by the support on the field. Then nothing can stop this country. I am a real believer of India. I'm a very deep believer of the skill set of this country. And I really believe that we are not going ahead because we don't have the right infrastructure to support our youth. So I honestly believe that online education can be that catalyst, and hence I'm really looking for that support.
Great. So you're saying intent is there from the government. It's now time for some implementation. Shalini, final word from you now.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And I think I'll go back to what Pramath was mentioning, and he blanked out for some time. So maybe if we can also have a little bit of last words from him, because we couldn't hear what he was saying. But it was essentially the same thing which we are working on together, which is a Samshiksha platform, where and it is being made with government support. And in an ideal environment, we want all content creators, the great content creators, to be hooked on to this platform, so that it's the students who are in remotest part of the country, they are able to access it and do an absolutely online virtual degree. So that's the dream that we are working towards, and that this needs a lot of stakeholders, both private and public players, and government, as well as the great content creators, the course creators, the teachers, the faculty, and the students, everything to come together. So a lot of support from the government in making it possible, and putting as a pathway to students, which can also be replicated in say in K-12 schools, as well as as students who are not even affiliated to universities would be a great way.
I think everything has been said. I will only add one more thing, and that is that I think the government and we all have to envision the future and work backwards from that to come up with whatever solutions and answers and platforms we are building. I think that we are still very caught up in the current model and solving the problems of the present. And we are not realizing that the scale at which we have to solve for education in this country has never, ever been attempted in the history of the human race. And the current solutions will not work in that setting. So the real opportunity for us is to actually rebuild education itself. And I'm not trying to be dramatic or have the last word and leave this on a high note. I genuinely mean it. I think we are not realizing that, what will it take to have 90 million people in college? I don't think we have ever really grappled with that. And that's really the exciting opportunity that we have ahead of us. And we cannot solve this on our own. We will have to involve the government and everybody else to solve that problem. Thank you very much for giving me a second chance to speak.
That's definitely some food for thought. And with that, we would like to close the session. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in.